comparable to what I would get as an advance, I've got half of that.
If you're wondering about launching a paid newsletter on Substack, is it worth it? How can you commit to writing regularly? What should you write about? Then today's conversation is just for you. I'm joined by Toby Litt, writer of short stories, novels, essays, memoir, and most recently, diaries. Toby is reader in creative writing at Birkbeck College, London, and the convener of the MFA in creative writing. And today we are going to be talking about a writer's diary. This is Toby's new creative venture on Substack. Toby, welcome.
Hi.
It's great to have you here.
It's lovely to be here.
So I want to start with something that you wrote about this venture that you have all really just started on Substack. So I pulled this up off your blog. You put, launching a writer's diary has been both thrilling and nerve shedding. So I'd really love to start there, like how the idea came about, and I'd love to hear about the thrills and the nerve shredding moments.
Well, God, that's a lot. Okay, so shall we start with the fear? The fear is that it will be horrible and go horribly wrong. That in a way you're presenting not necessarily your entirely polished self to people. That as we'll talk about, the form of the diary, it's been around for a while. Some of these entries, they're not written every day, but the sense that I want to give is of liveness, of live writing, of vivid life within the writing, and the writer giving that as a kind of credit to the reader, you know, that you're alive too. You might change, you might develop through this writing, which was part of the idea. The fear is that's a bit bonkers, and that people are going to think I'm publishing something that's really up itself and is just about itself. And I'm trying to show through it that a kind of hyper focus on a really small area, and this is something that went through Patience, my last novel as well, that this sort of focus can open things up in a different way. The excitement was that I've really wanted for a long time to do something in real time. And the old version of this idea, which I had years ago, was that I would write a really scary ghost story that people could only read when the sensor in their computer showed that the room was dark, and the clock on their computer showed that it was night. So I needed people to be at night and in the dark to read this imaginary ghost story, which I never wrote. But what I liked was the idea that, in a sense, the reader would have to buy into some of the conditions of a ghost story, rather than like me being a scaredy and watching horror films with the lights all on and taking breaks every 15 minutes to come back and not look at it. So those were the sort of two sides of it, and those have continued. I'd say that I'm still daily scared in a different way, looking at the page about what's going to go up, but also really excited that I have a different relation with readers, and that if I make a change, if I change a sentence, change what a sentence means, that could have an effect in 2 minutes time on the first person to read, to get the newsletter and open it, rather than quite possibly in 18 months or 2 years time, which is what it would be if it were a conventional novel, or even much, much longer if it's a collection of stories or something.
Yeah. It's really interesting, that sense of immediacy that you talk about, where yes, you can write something now and know that it's going to be read in minutes or hours later. I wonder how that affects like the motivation to come to write, because you know that the labor is going to be received straight away, rather than the sense of like, will this ever be read? Will it end up on the cutting room floor? So what have you noticed?
Well, Substack allows you to see certain things which you can see if with a tweet or with a blog. I've had a blog on WordPress for quite a long time, so you can see how many people are looking at what you've done, how many people have opened the newsletter you've sent out. You get likes, so you can see whether people have bothered to click on like or shares or those kind of things. So you get that, but more than that, I'm imagining someone involved in this who's not necessarily contacting me, but who is reading the diary as a live record of someone's life as it goes on. Although, as I say, it's kind of constructed, and it's kind of got a sense of where it's going, although the eye on the page doesn't have any sense. But what I feel is that I have a greater awareness of their response, and when I think of the things that I might leave in otherwise, I feel that I'm maybe slightly more callous about it. And it's just like, well, if someone's got to page 30 of a novel, you hope you've sort of got them in, and they might stick over this particular bit. Whereas if you think someone might be coming to this for the first time, this is the first entry they've read, you are really hyper aware of a fresh impression of each statement you make. That on one side, that may lead to being cautious, but I'm trying to make it lead to being incautious.
And how, that again is an intriguing concept, how we can shift from having that caution as a writer to being incautious. Is there anything that you are specifically deploying or specifically doing or not doing to allow that freedom in that you can tell?
Well, in the writing of a lot of the entries, I had no idea where they were going when they began, and a lot of them have a kind of liftoff effect. There's one which is already up, which is a sort of rough version of what some of the later ones do, which is that something very ordinary, like the surface of a cup of tea as it comes towards your face, reminds me of the surface of the sea and the surface of the Thames, but the surface of the sea. And then I'm, looking back, this is reconstructing it, I'm reminded of a couple of writers who did things with that, which is John Keats, who appears throughout and is my sort of model for that kind of writing, and the writer that I loved earliest and most, his poems, and then later on his letters, which are a bit like a journal and a bit like a diary. And then the other one was John Ruskin, and both of them in poems and in prose do these kind of imaginative flights where they look down on the sea, even though they never got the chance to be up in an aeroplane. So it's about the power of the imagination to take readers where they've never been, but also convincingly. I mean, they're pretty amazing descriptions of being sort of in orbit or flying over Europe, and quite accurate in ways for people who'd never been at that height. So those are a sort of a model of what I hope, and I think other people might say it's like free writing or something like that, but I have a sense it's more that you are full of uplift. You just need to untether sometimes, but that involves, it's taken me a long time to get to being able to write in this way, because it is trying to be free of certain obligations and responsibilities that writing often has. And a lot of the writing that I did a memoir called Wrestliana, and I think maybe lots of people who are writing memoir go through something similar, where you write pages that are sort of self-accusation of why should anyone be interested in reading this? And imagining your harshest critic, or the person who would be least likely to like it, and the things that they would throw at you. Now,
Yeah.
that's all negative self-talk that people do. But I kind of got it out of my system, and I realized that almost no one is going to read a memoir to go through the business of hearing someone's angst about, do I have the right to write this memoir? Most memoirs are about the stuff. So my memoir is about my great-great-great-grandfather, wrestling, being a man, masculinity, all that stuff. So I had to write those pages, clear that, and then sort of get the uplift of actually, okay, let's assume people are interested. Let's assume they've given you the benefit of the doubt. And I think quite a lot of that stuff I got through in actually getting to the point that I could write that book at all.
That's so useful to hear, Toby, this idea of, that level of commentary can be there and will be there, but it's a case of then either moving through it or removing it to then be like, okay, what's the content free of that? What would be the content that I would then share? And actually, there's something, again, I wanted to just read out that I found in your blog. You put, in this diary, I firmly believe is some of the best writing I've ever done. Writing I wouldn't have been able to do in any other form than this. And again, that really struck me, because I thought of the creative soul out there being like, should I start something on Substack? And that just seems like a beautiful call to action to say, you're going to find that there's maybe a free space where you might have felt constrained writing in another medium, but here it sounds like you've discovered something. I'd love for you to talk a bit more about that.
Well, it's clearly that's not without kind of anxieties, and these the purely negative voice doesn't necessarily go away. And yes, as you say, you can work these things in. They partly give it a power because you're speaking, you're pushing against something. But I would say that what I feel in that, having written better than I would have done, is because when some of the things that I would have felt before, no, you can't put that on this particular page, that will have to wait for somewhere else. There will be an appropriate moment when you can make that jump. Diary writing, because it's associational and because it's in the moment, and it only has responsibility to sort of transcribing someone's head at the point that they're saying, this point in the day I've sat down to write about it, means that if I want to go to philosophy, or if I want to go to a memory, or if I want to go to the cat scratching my leg, or I want to go to the mysterious appearance of ladybirds at a certain time of the year, or ants flying, or those kind of things, I can do it like that. And because I can do it like that, I think it's less dead. And the thing I'm trying to sort of think through over the course of the whole year is, how do I credit the reader with being as alive as I am? Now that sounds wrong. What I mean is that they're actually reading something I've written, they're responding to it. I haven't prepared a kind of program, and it's not a novel in the sense that I want to have these certain effects that I know how they're going to work. What I want is that sense of there are big things going on in the background of our lives. There are small things in front of us. We go through moment by moment in often a very panicked way, but one that's also very rich in associations. And if I can get that down on the page, and I hope sometimes I've come close to it, where because they've been with me for a while, the readers are getting the associations, but also getting that momentariness. That's a different thing than what I often see as the kind of dutiful writing of fiction, which is I need to make people know how big this room is. I need to make them know that this person is remembering when they had an affair with someone, and they're nostalgic for that. And all of that is great, but it can sometimes feel like a load of checkboxes that you have to go through and tick them all, rather than something which on the page as well. So I'm saying, I'm the writer, I'm alive, you the reader, you're alive. The page is also alive, and stuff can bloom on it. Stuff can happen on the top half of it that you could not possibly have anticipated on the top half. And to me, that's quite exciting. It can sound a bit bonkers, but I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
But it's like lots of forms of writing, but not necessarily like writing that is following Robert McKee's story structure, or something that is has an aim, a kind of agenda on the reader, which is I'm going to kind of take you on the thrill ride of a lifetime. Instead, it's more about being slightly gentler with it. But I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, people will read some entries and it'll take the top of their heads off.
Yeah, I mean, already there's over, well, what are we now? We're almost in the third week of it. What struck me as I read was the immediacy of it. I mean, now when I first read it, as I shared with you before we started recording, I thought it was you literally having written your diary that day and then typing it up. And interestingly, now I know that's not quite the case. I still feel that sense of immediacy, and I still feel that sense of just being inside your head with the simplicity of your observations, which I love. Like, for me as a writer, I love the experience that I'm being given of almost like the words in their purest form and the sentences in their purest form, because it's really making me see how beautiful writing is. It doesn't need all of this structure and all of this fixing. Like, it can just be beautiful in this really pure form. So I commend you that you've kept that purity, even though this is rewritten stuff. So it's rewritten, it has structure, but what you took as the impression is the right impression. I want it to give that, but it's post-produced in the sense that I want to have used all my skills as a writer, whatever they are, that I've developed over the years, to make this as real a diary as it is. But I call it a hyper diary. It is a kind of hyper diary. It's dovetailed years, it's condensed time, it's intensified life. So let's come back to the person watching this who's like, okay, I like the idea of starting a creative project where I'm not beholden, where I'm free to explore. Talk about some of the preparation you did. In fact, I also want to go back to the moment when you were like, I'm going to do this. Like you said, you had this idea of the ghost story. So we can see that's now transitioned into a writer's diary. So when was the moment when you were like, oh, it's going to be a writer's diary and I'm going to do it on Substack?
Well, those were two separate moments. And the first one, I don't know if I can even remember. I've tried to remember, but I do sometimes just write in journals, in big black notebooks, a page, and do that daily and things. And so in a way, I was already writing in that form. And I tend to start a series of those when I have a book that I think I might write, a letter, because, you know, there's an alphabetical thing going on, although a writer's diary completely blows it. But if I'm doing that, I have a notebook labeled S or something, and I will start writing in that around what I think the novel, whatever it's going to be, could be.
Okay.
So in a sense, I was writing in the form already, and then I realized that some of these were linking up, and that there could be a chronology to them. And clearly there was a moment at which I realized that this could be a diary. In other words, that rather than being a journal without a date on the page, that it was similar to some of the writing I was doing in my diary anyway, because I do keep a diary. When you said in your introduction that Toby's latest thing is a diary, and I thought, well, actually the earliest thing that I've got is my diary from like 1984, where I'm starting thinking, oh, I've been studying Winston Smith's diary, you know, the clock striking 13, all that kind of stuff. So I wrote diaries when I wasn't writing lots of other things. I was writing poems. So those two things were separate moments, realizing it was a diary, and then come on to Substack. I only heard about Substack, I think, in November. Maybe there was which probably when lots of people heard about it. There was an article in The Guardian. It was talking about who was on it. Jeanette Winterson, Salman Rushdie were signing up. Adrian Tominer, who's the graphic novelist whose work I really love, was signed up as a kind of artist in residence. And then George Saunders was doing a story club. So I was tipping towards it because I'd written a diary, essentially. And I thought, this is the perfect way to do it. I could have done it on WordPress. I could have released it every day through my own blog, which had the readers there already. But because of Substack's form, it seemed that the best thing to do was to take it across. And in a way, it empowers it slightly, because the form is meant for that. It's the blogs are about regular connection, and the fact that I had been attempting something where liveness was really important in it, the idea of being as alive as possible in the writing and for the reader, and the reader being credited with that, all of those things.
Yeah.
I needed to check with some people because if it's going to come out as a book, then those people need to say okay, and so that people said okay, then I started the preparation, the practical preparation, which took a slightly different form than writing normally does, which is that I looked at a month's leading to launching. I watched all the videos there are on Substack about how to build up. I thought about blogs that I could do in advance of the launch date, which was January the 1st. So a couple announcing the idea, explaining the idea, talking about some of the books I've been thinking about, giving a kind of background. But I said, I'll take these down from the main Substack page. So it starts with January the 1st, where there's an intro, but it basically starts with January the 1st. So I thought about a kind of launch.
Yeah.
And then probably most importantly, in a way, because and this was one of the reasons thinking I could do this. Why are people interested in me at all? Well, if on the internet, they tend to be interested in me because of my blogs and starting to write course. And I've done one called Writing and Shit, which is about people who feel that they're in the crap with their writing. And those things on tobylitt.com have drawn people in. And I know that when I tweet stuff about writing blogs, they tend to get more of a response than when I tweet a poem I've written or an opinion I have. So in a sense, I felt there was an audience that I'd already developed. So a lot of the stuff that you might be told to do, I think I'd already done, not consciously. So I'd written it in a way without realizing I was writing it for Substack. And I'd formed an audience who were interested in writing in free stuff that I'd given away about writing, exercises and attitude to things, and then on a kind of higher level, thinking about what's good writing and how to get better, all those kind of things. So that was there.
Yeah.
That was all there. And I needed to gather it together, sit down, make a kind of schedule of what was going to happen when, because after January the 1st, it was quite simple. And then basically carry that out. And the really exciting thing was seeing that you're able to import your mailing list. Now, obviously, there's laws about bothering people, but if someone's given you permission to mail out from WordPress, essentially they've given you permission to mail out from Substack or somewhere else. So those people were signed up to my newsletters and stuff. And so I brought them across to Substack and sent them the first thing and said, if you want to unsubscribe, that's fine. And then you're kind of taken care of. So I have a certain number of people who were there already, and then that's been expanding. What was amazing is that Substack is partly about people supporting you and being your patrons. And although I haven't made anything exclusively behind a paywall, I did one post just to kind of demonstrate how that would work. Later on in the year, different bits of it will be, but people are supporting me already.
That's really exciting to hear.
And I would say that, comparable to what I would get as an advance, I've got half of that through the support that's come through people becoming patrons, and there are different levels of that. But if you want some sense of audience that likes what you're doing, them giving you $5 a month is really nice.
Yeah. I'm glad that you shared that, Toby, because I think also what I'm hearing is how wonderful it is. It's almost like there's no middleman in this. There's no publisher. There's no one taking a fee. You literally get to experience the love of your audience. I mean, love might not be the word that you use, but you literally get to experience that loyalty or that interest without anybody being involved, or without having to wait 18 months for the draft to become the book on the shelf. So there seems to be some real benefit in this whole system.
Yeah, I think that there are lots of middle people in publishing, and lots of them do things that are absolutely necessary and draw attention to work. So people work in publicity or marketing or whatever, they often get, people knock them, but they bring readers to books, and you, unless you're doing that yourself, and I feel generally pretty awkward about it, selling myself, but unless you have someone doing that, then it's not going to happen. However, with this, I think my feeling is there's a release from trying to please too many people, because the people sticking around and opening the newsletters and things are there for what you're doing. So if you are, I guess it used to be called microblogging, didn't it? If you are being very, very specific about things, and you're talking about things where maybe you would assume people would have some knowledge of them, an editor might come in and say, can you kind of footnote this? Can you make this so that a general reader would get it? And also in terms of taste, if people don't want to stick around for this, they won't. But I think if they do, they will get a much more intense reading, I can't think of any word, experience. They will experience a different kind of reading over a period of time that we'll share, and by the end of it, I think they'll look back and think, I hope that couldn't have been done any other way.
I want to come to a final quote that I read in the WordPress blog, Because again, I'm thinking of the person listening who's like, if I pre-write the whole thing, that's a lot, or if I'm just going every day. But I think there's something quite that people should know about what you're offering, is that it's different lengths. And so I'm going to read this final quote. Some entries will be a page long, some will only be a few words or a single word. And there's one entry now that is a single word, lifelessness. And actually, it was so profound to come to that entry, because all of the space around it, I was like, what brings a man to his desk to just write that one word? So it really sparked my imagination. So it's to sort of say, it doesn't have to be this sort of profound essay or this profound life experience. Like a word or a sentence can also tell that story. So I'd love for you to share some of the decision, because it is pre-written. So you made that choice. Well, today's entry is going to be one word.
Yeah.
So how did you come to decide that this is going to be a word, or this is just going to be a sentence?
Well, interestingly, with that one, as an example, up until 3 minutes before it went out, the word was lifeless. And then I've been thinking that lifelessness had this kind of dying thing, that as the longer it goes on, lifelessness, it kind of loses energy as it goes along, and the ness is less necessary than lots of bits of words. So I did make that change. When you leave space on the page, which a lot of people do now, someone I taught at an Arvon course once has done a PhD about this, and it's there are lots of books where there's a lot of blank space in between sections, or maybe even just a couple of words on the page. But I would say most people kind of read them fast. So those aren't necessarily felt. The writer really wants to put meaning into the gaps, and that's one of the things I've been thinking about. But when there's a time gap as well, then you knew that the diary entry was coming that day, and then when it came, there was a period of time before maybe you were wondering a bit. I mean, clearly it's not the most important thing in your life, and then afterwards you had time to think about it, but you couldn't just turn the page.
Oh yeah, so I see what you're saying.
It's created space around it, with space which is time. So yes, I considered very carefully what that would be, but it comes just before in the diary, the discovery that the narrator, who is me, but not me right now, is the pregnancy test is positive, and their partner Lee, they're very pleased about that. They've had difficulties conceiving before, so at that point within a diary that's 12 months, and that's coming on the 10th, I think, that there's a 9-month period within that where certain things may happen at certain times, and there may be a certain outcome, which might be a baby. And the diary also starts with being at home with the parents of the narrator, who's a bit like me, and that that the mother is ill, so you also know that she's seriously ill, so that that's happening in the same way. So those bigger things, the bigger things in life that I was talking about, are behind that and putting pressure on those things. So all the things I've been saying about life and vividness, and that page is like a low point, as you say, which is that there is a lifelessness in that as writing, but there's a lifelessness at that point in the life, and then the rest of the year is almost about being anti that.
This is so cool, Toby. And yeah, when you mentioned the concept of, and I'm definitely guilty of this. If I'm reading a book and it's, if it's got a short poem in it, I'll read it and I'll just move. Oh, that was good, and just move on to the next one. So yes, I think there is something really interesting about the time constraint that comes in there.
And I'm even worse. I read short story collections from shortest story to longest, and the longest is the one where I'm kind of stuck on a train. But if you think that Substack might be right for you, or another thing, that's one of the things that you're able to do, is think about I'm trying to write tea time writing, or I'm trying to write first thing in the morning writing, and when it appears will be the time that you've chosen, and that in its sense is a way of connecting what you're actually doing and your sense of how it should be with how it comes across to people. And if the technology is bringing us anything, then maybe it is that live relation, because we've had books on shelves for a long time. What we haven't necessarily had is utterances that might come at the right moment. They might just happen to get through to someone and say the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, and that's a really nice concept. And I don't know, you must have this as well. If you put a piece of content out there, someone saying, I needed this today. So you do have a sense of, like, you know, you appeared on their feed or they opened your newsletter, and there was a synchronicity that what the message that you were saying was really needed by someone. And that's one of the things I love about being able to have that direct relationship with an audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's tell people, I mean, we'll put the links so that they can come and find you on Substack, but I'd love for them to hear from you about, you know, what you're calling them to do if they're interested in coming along and joining this experience. Because I know, like you said, there's going to be some sort of doors that close, or some intimate experiences depending on their memberships.
Yeah. But if people sign up now and they use the link that you're going to give them, then it'll be free forever, and they won't have to. I'm basically going to put a kind of catch up on my WordPress and share that as a link, and that will always have the link that you can use to subscribe. You can go straight to it, the WordPress. If you just search for Toby and Writer's Diary and Substack, you probably find it. I hope you'd find it. And at the moment, you can see everything. The stuff's only going to disappear behind a paywall in parts of it. To start with, it's going to be what I call inserted pages, which are the sheets that you put in a diary where you think, God, one day I might just take this out because, you know, I want the kind of respectable version of me in the diary, even though it's not that respectable. But there are things where you think, oh God, you know, does this even fit? So that, and then people can just see how it takes them to read a day or two. If they want to look back, it's really easy to look back to the earlier entries. There aren't that many of them. But as I say, I'm going to, first of all, I've done the first 9 days on my WordPress. I'll do the first month. I'll probably do the first and second month as things. But then I'm going to do a digest of, you know, here are the days you need to read. You need to read January the 1st, January the 10th, and then kind of January the 15th, and then you're caught up to speed. In fact, if you've watched this video, you're up to speed with where it is now.
Awesome, Toby. So I'm going to put the links. I'll put the link, and also I'm going to put your Twitter handle as well, because that's quite nice. You know, you've got the sort of there's like daily images with quotes, which is also quite nice, to sort of taking bits out, which is nice to enjoy. And people can access the Substack from your Twitter anyway. So we'll put links to your website. We'll put the Substack link so that people can find you. If I just want to really just thank you for coming and chatting about it today. If
I haven't talked about it to hardly anyone, honestly.
Ooh, well, I feel
it's interesting for me too, because I have no idea what I'm going to say.
Well, I mean, everything has been, you know, for me, I love talking to you about writing, Toby. I've always enjoyed our conversations. It's been too long since we've had one, so I'm really glad that we had this excuse to catch up.
Yeah, it's great.
And where do you like hearing from people? Are you happy to hear from people on Twitter? Like, if people want to send you a message, obviously they can do it via the blog and Substack, can't they?
Twitter, friend me on Twitter. I follow back loyally. And apart from the guy who asked me to join the Illuminati yesterday, but yeah, actually he was on Instagram, let's be honest.
Okay.
And then I'm pretty much around you. My blog is just tobylitt.com. will take you to my WordPress, and you can contact me through there as well. But yeah, at Toby Litt on Twitter is easy.
Thank you. Toby, thank you so much for joining me.